Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is an expanded, reimagined version of one of gaming's most beloved stories. But what if you've never played it before? What is this world? Who are these characters? And why does this game mean so much to many? In this video, we're taking a deep dive into the world of Midgar and the Final Fantasy Remake, assuming that you've never played the original. So whether you already know the story or just curious, strap in, get comfy, subscribe if you somehow came across this video, and let's do this. I should mention that this is going to serve as a part 1 with part 2 covering Rebirth, but enough stalling, let's go. I've seen many people calling Final Fantasy VII Remake more spectacle than substance, but I disagree. Final Fantasy Remake is a modern-day reimagining and retelling of the 1997 classic Final Fantasy VII story, with a focus more on group storytelling with Cloud, Tifa, Barret, Aerith, and more characters we'll introduce later. The game has been reimagined with modern-day graphics and an expanded world thanks to engine upgrades and new technology emerging over the years, hence the integrate to PC. The 1997 Legend made strides during the time it was released for its deep and engaging storytelling, thrilling and addicting gameplay, and for it being the first 3D Final Fantasy game in the series. Final Fantasy VII-R, as I'll refer to her from now on, also includes a bonus DLC featuring Yuffie Kisaragi, a character not originally available to play in the main game, but sets up the story for the second game in the Remake trilogy. Today we are breaking down part 1 of the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy, so whether you're new to the series or just curious, this is your introduction to the game that took the RPG world by storm in 1997. Final Fantasy VII-R takes place in the nation of Midgar, a sprawling dystopian metropolis controlled by the Shinra Electric Company. Shinra goes against Avalanche's goals and goals of a lot of people as Shinra extracts Mako energy. But what is Mako energy? Mako is the planet's lifeblood, and Shinra extracts this energy source from the Earth to fuel its technological advancements, but at a devastating cost. Midgar as a society has a political and social divide, and the rich and fortunate are to live on the top side of the plate, where we will get to see bits and pieces in the early game, but a lot more later. And on the underside, where the poor and not so fortunate in life live, are the slums, where most of the early to mid game will take place. Enter Cloud Strife, our ex-soldier who turned away from the Shinra Corps, now working for eco-terrorism turned resistance group Avalanche. There's more to Cloud as he struggles to make sense of his own memories, and as cold as shallow as a character he may seem at the beginning, only caring for money above all, we see some insane character development and the people he interacts with that lead him into changing for the better. Tifa Lockhart. This is Cloud's childhood friend and member of Avalanche, who has her own realization throughout the game and is more fleshed out. Barret Wallace, the leader of this Avalanche unit determined to destroy Shinra for what they represent and however they steal Mako from the Earth for corporate greed. He also has a daughter named Marlene, who is not his daughter, but he cares for her as his own, and had his arm shot off years ago in an escape of Marlene's father, which ended in his death, and Barret losing his arm, but again, we're not going to go into that because we're assuming that you never played the original Final Fantasy VII. Aerith Gainsborough is a local florist and flower seller we run into the early game and don't see much of her until about chapter 5, I think it is, later on in the game, but she plays a pivotal role into the story as we will discuss later. The Shinra Corporation are our would-be villains in this first part of the trilogy as their objectives do not align with our own. Shinra started out as the world's electric company, but they would tap into the power of Mako, and resources were being extracted by using Mako power. Coupled with industrial and technological advances, Shinra became bigger and bigger, eventually turning into the Shinra Corporation, the world's electric company, deploying its own departments such as advanced weaponry, research and development, urban planning, space and aeronautics, and even going as far as public security forces, because that's just how big and powerful they've gotten by extracting and tapping into the Mako power, Mako energy. I was debating on talking about him, but there's also a guest appearance from Sephiroth later on in the game, as it's hinted that he is starting to manifest himself. Without going too deeply, because you don't really see him until late game, but a short description: Sephiroth is the result of what happened when the Shinra Corps was trying to recreate the power of the ancients for their military strength. Also, they used his mother as a conduit, and he is not happy right now. We also have Yuffie Kisaragi from the Intermission DLC, who's a ninja from Wutai, who actually helped set up the events of the next game in the Remake trilogy. But we won't really talk about much of her or Wutai, because once again, we're assuming that you never played the original. So that was just me talking about characters and the setting itself, but what about the gameplay? Final Fantasy VII Remake blends real-time action with strategic command-based combat to keep you always engaged and always in the fight, as you control every character like a chess piece. So imagine like using your mage to heal your fighters or having your tank absorb incoming damage for your party. Every character in Final Fantasy VII-R can be deeply customized, giving your party members the ability to use buffs and debuffs, heal one another, or even cast elemental magic, all thanks to the materia system. Regarding your party, our party's roles is Cloud as your balanced overall fighter, Tifa is the fast melee brawler, and some of the abilities you get for her from gear, like that Star Shower ability, man, that shit is so fun to hit on like multiple enemies at once, like on mobs. Barret is the tank of the party, and like, man, he's a damn good one too, especially if you give him the prey materia. And Aerith, who's our fragile mage, who has high amounts of mana points. And I will say, this game does a fantastic job on explaining like game systems, like materia and upgrading characters. I know a lot of people say like 10 did a good job, but this game also does a good job as well, so just a little praise from me there. But what is Final Fantasy VII Remake about? Well, our story starts as Cloud is hired by Avalanche leader Barret in order to help with blowing up and ultimate destruction of Mako Reactor 1. But things quickly escalate out of control, leading to a chain of events that catch Cloud in a web of something much bigger than he thought was. Throughout the game, we see how Shinra reacts to Avalanche's activities that lead to a sort of back and forth spat between Avalanche and Shinra, and you can skip this part if you don't want any spoilers, but for example, after the destruction of Mako Reactor 1, we see more Shinra troops in the streets and even the appearance of different units within the Shinra combat unit, with the peak of this being when the Turks, Shinra's most elite fighting force, were deployed. Another example we see in game is when we go and destroy Mako Reactor 5, and in response, Shinra frames Avalanche as worldwide terrorists and drops the plate on Sector 7. Throughout the game, you may have also seen these shadowy figures that intervene in certain events in the story. These are whispers. Essentially, these are beings that manipulate fate itself, and we see how this fate versus free will message is conveyed all game with how our characters interact with the whispers. I'm going to add this part because with no spoilers, I'm going to add this part here but with no spoilers, but alongside our story, Yuffie, a ninja from Wutai, is sent on a mission to steal the secret weapon of Midgard, but uncovers a whole wider conspiracy. The environmentalism and corporate greed portrayed in Final Fantasy VII-R reflect our real world in many ways, such as companies not caring about pollution as long as it satisfies their profits, or said investors that are exploiting medicine throughout would be unfortunate people could not get what would be benefit. Our planet is being run dry just like in Final Fantasy VII, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mother Nature wants her planet back anytime soon. Throughout the game, you'll notice little flashbacks or cutaways regarding Cloud. This is because Cloud has his memories mixed with Zack's. Zack is an elite soldier from the original Final Fantasy, but this game assumes that you've already played the original Final Fantasy. Cloud is struggling to make sense of any of this, but we will soon find that these mean so much more than just little flashbacks. Fate versus free will is depicted very nicely in Final Fantasy VII-R, as there exists a time stream where everything in the universe is essentially set in stone. Cloud and the crew are attempting to defy that which is set in stone. That's why we see the whispers in game, or these shadowy, like cloaked creatures. We know that they are there to make sure that things are in order, but if one dares to defy fate, like Sephiroth for example, or things aren't going as by fate should be, that's when we see those whispers appear before those who would wish to defy fate. And I know that was a mouthful, so I'm sorry. So why should you play Final Fantasy VII Remake, and why is this so important to the series as a whole? Well, besides the stunning visuals and cinematic storytelling, like just from the main story alone, I have so many screenshots saved because this game just looks so damn good, like especially as a next-gen game in the 2020s. Final Fantasy features a rich, immersive world that blends cyberpunk and fantasy, making it easy to become immersed for hours, and if you're anything like me, I played on my 2 off days for 24 of the 48 hours I had off. This story is compelling and will have you asking yourself questions and wondering what to do certain things pertain or how they fold into the current or next series of events. This game will have you on the tip of your toes wanting more, dare I say triple fold, when you become invested with these relatable characters. Even if you've never played the original or even a Final Fantasy game period, I would say this is a good starting point for newcomers of the modern gaming age, as systems are explained just as good if not better than 10, mechanics and engine upgrades are up to date, and it's also a retelling of a beloved story for all generations. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a must-play experience for fans both old and new, or even if you're just getting into RPGs as a whole. This game is very forgiving, granted that you're able to manage your party's abilities, items, and health. Me personally, I've only died 5 times throughout the whole game, so it's very lenient towards its players, but you are able to change the difficulty if you want more of a challenge. From its stunning visuals to its deep and sophisticated storytelling, this game can leave you immersed for hours on end. Like I said personally, I spent 24 of my 48 hours on my off days solely playing this game during my time in Midgar. So I ask you, are you new to Final Fantasy or Final Fantasy VII or RPGs as general? Or are you a longtime fan? What interests you most about this game? Let's talk about it in the comments and subscribe for more deep dives covering our favorite RPGs and single player games.